Imagine you're a German infantryman in late 1943. The orders are simple: hold the line. But as night falls, your platoon is suddenly isolated. No reinforcements, no radio contact, and the enemy is closing in from all sides. You think, just a quick skirmish, we'll get out by dawn. But dawn never comes. What happens when a well-trained Wehrmacht unit becomes stranded, hunted, and forced into sheer survival mode across a freezing forest, starving, wounded, terrified? This is the night of survival, a real story of a platoon trapped behind enemy lines, fighting not just bullets, but fear, darkness, and its own doubts.
We'll explore 4 segments pressures the platoon faced, and in each, the key survival decision or tactic they used. These become our lessons. Segment A, the cutoff moment. Segment B, sustaining through darkness and hunger. Segment C, navigating the threat landscape. And Segment D, the breakout and aftermath. A, the cutoff moment. It was late autumn 1943 on the Eastern Front. The air was sharp with frost, carrying a bitter wind that whipped across the barren landscape, bending trees and twisting barbed wire into ghost-like silhouettes. The ground was frozen, hard enough to crack boots, and each step echoed unnervingly in the silence. The platoon, 3rd Company's 2nd Platoon, had been ordered to push forward, extending the German line after a local advance. They cleared a small village, swept through abandoned houses, and dug in for the night. For a moment, there was a sense of accomplishment, the quiet satisfaction of soldiers who had done their duty. But danger lurked quietly. Enemy forces, unseen and cunning, executed a precise flanking maneuver. Reinforcements that were supposed to link up with them never arrived. Slowly, the horrifying truth sank in. Their east and west roads were blocked. Communication was severed. No radio contact, no messengers, nothing. They were utterly alone. One of the sergeants later wrote, "We realized only when it was too late. We were suddenly alone." Key decision 1, secure your perimeter immediately. Panic would have been fatal. The platoon reacted with cold precision. They split into security teams. One stayed to guard the dugouts. The other patrolled outward into the darkness, probing for threats. The logic was simple but vital. Once surrounded, waiting passively means certain disaster. You push your security outward, detect danger early, and buy precious time. But the platoon had its limits. They were understaffed, low on light, and exhausted from hours of marching and skirmishes. Discipline mattered more than brute strength. Leaders enforced rotations to keep men alert. At least a few soldiers were awake at all times, ears straining, eyes scanning the dark forest line. Silence was mandatory. Even a cough or a snapped twig could give their position away. The atmosphere was suffocating. Shadows seemed to move with a mind of their own, and every distant noise, the snap of a branch, the whisper of wind, sent hearts racing. Sleep was a luxury they could not afford, yet fatigue gnawed at them. Each soldier battled both external danger and their internal struggle to stay conscious. Comment below, if you were isolated in darkness tonight, with unseen enemies closing in, would you risk sleeping or stay on watch? Be honest, we've all faced tough choices in our own way. The night stretched endlessly. The platoon huddled in frozen dugouts, listening to distant gunfire and the occasional rustle of enemy scouts. Every decision mattered. A wrong step could betray their position. And in this quiet, tense moment, they were forced to confront a stark reality. Survival depended not on courage alone, but on strategy, vigilance, and trust in each other.
B, sustaining through darkness and hunger. The platoon had barely any rations left. They had expected a single night behind enemy lines, not multiple nights. By midnight, food was gone. Temperatures had plummeted. Frostbite began to claim fingers and toes, and morale wavered with each passing hour. Every groan, every shiver was a stark reminder that survival would not come easy. Key decision 2, rationing and improvisation. Every crumb was precious. They divided the last scraps of bread, boiled snow and dented helmets for water, and scavenged every drop of liquid they could find. One sharp-eyed private noticed a broken fuel line in an abandoned vehicle nearby. With careful hands, he siphoned the gasoline to power a small stove, the only thing keeping them from freezing while melting snow for hot soup. That meager broth became a symbol of hope. A wounded man whispered hoarsely, "I never thought I'd be so happy to sip hot broth." They turned desperation into ingenuity. A torn map, once used for navigation, became insulation inside a coat. A tattered blanket was cut into strips to wrap open wounds. Even fragments of a kimono cloth captured from local civilians were twisted into makeshift bandages. Every tiny piece of material, every scrap of fuel could mean life or death. Hunger wasn't just physical, it was psychological torture. Fear twisted stomachs, nerves frayed, and whispers of despair threatened to overwhelm them. To combat this, the platoon assigned a rotating morale leader. Each hour, someone would crack a joke, hum a song, or tell a small, absurd story from home. It seemed ridiculous, yet those brief bursts of laughter were as vital as food or warmth. Meanwhile, survival demanded vigilance. Every shadow in the trees could conceal an enemy patrol. Snipers waited in silence, ready to pick off careless movements. Improvised traps lay along likely paths, a cruel reminder that the forest itself was now an enemy. The soldiers learned to move like ghosts, keeping low, whispering softly, and listening to every sound. The snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves, even the faintest breath of wind. Cold, hunger, and fear weren't the only adversaries. Time itself became the enemy. Hours stretched into nights, and nights into an eternity. Every decision, every ration, every step could tip the balance between life and death. The men weren't just fighting hunger. They were fighting the creeping terror of the unknown, the unrelenting silence of the dark forest, and the gnawing thought that help might never come.
C. Navigating the threat landscape. By midnight, the forest around them had transformed into a living threat. Shadows stretched long under the pale moonlight, branches creaked ominously, and the faintest rustle could mean enemy scouts, armored cars, or patrols were nearby. The platoon knew staying in one place was a death sentence. Either they'd be encircled, ambushed, or shelled without warning. Key Decision 3. Choosing when and how to move. Movement had to be stealthy, calculated, and deliberate. They chose to travel in small groups, slipping from cover to cover, never staying long in open areas. At first light, they would sprint for the ridgeline, then melt back into the thick forest, using shadows and terrain to hide their presence. Rivers and ravines became natural barriers, paths of tall grass offered concealment, and every tree was a potential shield. A stroke of luck came in the form of a sergeant whose grandmother had grown up in this very region. He recognized an old hunter's path snaking through dense pines, narrow, twisting, and nearly invisible from above. Avoiding the main roads wasn't just clever, it was life-saving. Every step along that hidden route kept them off the enemy's radar. The platoon didn't rely on movement alone, they became masters of deception. Dummy footprints led the enemy in circles. Broken twigs, deliberately snapped, pointed to false paths. They even constructed fake campfires, using smoldering embers and smoke to suggest they were resting elsewhere. The enemy scouts, fooled by these ruses, wasted precious hours chasing illusions. Tension was constant. During one cautious move, a sniper's bullet shattered a branch overhead. The leader yelled, "Duck! Ammunition on the left flank!" and the men threw themselves to the frozen forest floor. Hearts pounded, eyes wide, every nerve screaming. A young private froze in terror, rigid as a tree. Another whispered sharply, "Roll, don't dead!" He rolled instinctively and escaped unharmed, a tiny victory against the ever-present danger. Every decision, every footstep was a gamble. The soldiers learned to read the forest like a map, listening to distant bird calls, following patterns in the wind, and noting every disturbance in leaves or snow. Even moonlight became a concern. They avoided exposed ridges where shadows would give them away, timing their moves with clouds drifting across the night sky. The platoon's use of terrain, stealth, and psychological tricks bought them precious hours, hours that could mean the difference between survival and annihilation.
Every false trail, every careful move, every whisper in the night reinforced a single lesson. In this frozen, hostile wilderness, brains and cunning mattered more than brute force. By the time the first light of dawn streaked the horizon, they had traversed nearly 5 kilometers of perilous forest, dodged at least 2 enemy patrols, and preserved enough strength to continue the struggle. For the platoon, survival wasn't just about fighting, it was about thinking, adapting, and trusting each other in a world that had become a shadowy predator.
D. The breakout and aftermath. As the first pale streaks of dawn pierced the dark forest, the platoon spotted a weak point in the enemy lines, a small clearing near an abandoned, crumbling farm. It wasn't ideal. Open ground was a death trap under machine gun fire, but it was their only chance. The forest had offered cover for hours, but staying put meant eventual encirclement. They had to act. Key decision 4. Risk versus reward in breakout timing. At 04:30 a.m., the platoon made their move. 2 rifle teams laid down suppression fire, forcing enemy heads down. Simultaneously, the rest of the men flanked, using a makeshift smoke bomb, torn cloth soaked in alcohol and tossed into the clearing to create a haze of concealment. The smoke twisted and billowed, turning the farm and surrounding field into a ghostly battlefield. Every step was a gamble. Soldiers sprinted across open ground, bullets slicing the air around them. They dove into shallow ditches when tracer rounds whizzed by, crawled through tangled barbed wire, and pulled one another out of mud and snow. One private tripped over a gnarled tree root, scraping his face, while another was wounded in the leg. Yet the platoon pressed on, carrying the injured, pushing through exhaustion and fear. They didn't stop, didn't hesitate, and didn't glance back until they finally crashed into the safety of friendly lines at 07:12 a.m. The moment was chaotic. Guns still fired in the distance, but relief and disbelief washed over them. Soldiers slumped against one another, shivering from cold, adrenaline, and sheer exhaustion. Every man bore cuts, bruises, frostbite forming on fingers and toes, and yet there was a spark of triumph in their eyes. They had survived against impossible odds. During debrief, their battalion commander shook his head in awe and muttered, "Miraculous." But the platoon's leader scoffed softly, replying, "Miracle? No, we just refused to quit." That night left scars. Many soldiers were permanently marked by wounds or trauma. The platoon's numbers were decimated, yet what remained of their cohesion, courage, and sheer determination became legendary. In letters home, one young private wrote, "I would die 100 times before I'd let that night define my fear." The breakout wasn't just a tactical maneuver, it was a testament to human resilience. The night had tested every skill they possessed: stealth, strategy, endurance, and morale. And though the forest, the frost, and the enemy had claimed much, the essence of the platoon survived: unity, ingenuity, and the relentless refusal to surrender.
All right, let's wrap this brutal, beautiful story into your memory. What did our platoon teach us? Secure early, even when weak. Push your security outward. Ration smart, improvise hard. Every resource matters. Move wisely, deceive boldly. Terrain plus deception can beat brute force. Break out decisively as a team. Courage plus timing equals survival. So, next time you feel boxed in, whether in war or life, remember, isolation doesn't always mean defeat. With the right moves, mindset, and a bit of grit, you can claw your way out. If you want more gripping stories from WW2's hidden trenches, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and share this with someone who loves war stories. Also, drop in the comments, if you were stuck behind enemy lines, which tip would save you first? I'll read every comment. Thanks for watching, stay sharp, stay curious, and see you in the next hidden battlefield.